I had a lot of fun yesterday doing some videos on some of my modified carry guns, and I thought that I would do a couple more videos on guns that really aren't necessarily carry guns for me, but are pretty heavily modified and are pretty interesting. So in front of you here today, or really in front of me and underneath the camera, is this Colt 1911. Now obviously this is not a gun that is a normal configuration, and that's because this gun was pretty heavily modified to be a Bullseye gun. The work done to this gun was likely done in the 50s, 60s, or early 70s, and I got it as pictured from the Rock Island auction house last month. Aside from these grips, I got it for about $800 after taxes and fees and shipping and whatnot. So the neat thing here is that this is a 1911. This is not a 1911A1. This is a model of 1911 U.S. Army, and then we have United States property stamped here. The gun was made in 1919, which puts it at 105 years old. Obviously, there was some refinishing work when the work was done to it because, I mean, this gun looks really good for being 105 years old. If I look this good at 105, I've probably been in Utah too long and had a whole lot of Botox done. So let's talk about this gun. Obviously, it shipped as a model of 1911 when it was made in 1919, but this work was done to it at some point for Bullseye competition shooting. Going from top to bottom, we have a really nifty, heavy Bomar sight rib. This one has the extended sight on here. They have some models that the sight just comes into the slide, but this one we have an extra like 2 inches of sight radius. This is really nifty. I had actually never seen one of these in person prior to opening up the box at my gun shop and getting this. I think it's cool. One of the issues for me is that as someone who'd prefer to try to figure out a way to cram this in a holster, getting replacement sight ribs is really hard because, you know, Bomar's been out of business for 40 or 50 years. Trying to find replacement sight ribs online is not exactly the most fruitful thing, and getting replacement front sights is basically impossible. But it's pretty nifty. If you've used any sort of modern 1911 with a Bomar style sight, these are really easy to use. They're really easy to adjust to get proper windage and elevation. Admittedly, when I shot this gun last month, I really couldn't zero it because the sight rib kept wanting to come loose. I was a little hesitant to putting Loctite on this pistol just because of the age, but I ended up doing it, so when I get to shooting this gun again once I'm recovered from my injuries, I think that'll be a fun time. So we have the Bomar sight rib on top. Moving from top to bottom, a national match barrel and barrel bushing were fitted to the gun. Overall, this is a very, very tight gun, which makes sense when you think bullseye shooting where accuracy was more important than everything else. If I flip the safety off, and I'm actually going to remove the magazine so we don't have any sort of extra things there, the slide fit to frame fit in every direction is actually kind of insane. Like, there is no movement, no noise at all. This is a very tight gun. It surprised me because this gun was 100% reliable when I shot it last month. So I think that's pretty nifty. Continuing to move down, we can see that the slide's kind of like a blued finish and the frame's kind of more of a parkerized finish. Again, this gun was likely refinished at some point. We're going to put our magazine back in there. The controls here are mostly the same. We have a traditional, kind of more GI-looking hammer. We have the original 1911 very small thumb safety, but it's incredibly positive. I'm going to get it close to the microphone here. I don't know how well that's coming through here, but this is one of the most positive safeties I've used, and that's because it was fitted pretty good by Colt back in the day. The slide release has been checkered quite well here, so it's very easy to use it as a slide release, but it also has like a larger ledge here. I say larger ledge, it's standard, but it's just because of the way it's machined, it's very easy to get your thumb under there to rack the slide open. The beaver tail here, as you can see, is not a GI one, but it probably was at one point. Someone welded on an actual beaver tail onto the grip safety here, which means you actually get a pretty good coverage in the palm. Now, I've actually got some scarification here from shooting GI 1911s over the years, so I kind of need a beaver tail grip safety to not slice my hand open, and I really dig that on this gun. The trigger here is either aftermarket or it could have been off of one of the Colt competition models. Has an over-travel screw. It's probably aluminum from how it feels. However, it has some problems. This was something I was made aware of when I won the gun via Rock Island. We fixed it partially. Sorry, the gun's so tight it's hard to actually like rack the slide a little bit. We fixed it partially, but the trigger bow in this trigger is actually a little bit bent. So with a 1911, your trigger is like this. You have the actual trigger you pull, and then there's 2 bows that move, and they straddle. This is difficult here. Let's do it this way. They straddle the sides of the magazine as you're pulling the trigger. The magazine's like this, you pull the trigger, they straddle the sides. What's happening is that one of the sides of the trigger bow is rubbing on the magazine itself. And it doesn't matter what magazine it is, whether it's this one or a Wilson mag, whatever it might be. And what's happening is that with no magazine in the gun, we have a nice, crisp, like 4-pound trigger pull. With the magazine in the gun, you can feel resistance. And I put it on my gauge earlier. It's like 5 pounds with the magazine in there. So what's the fix? Well, we partially bent the bow back out to make it work better, but the juice really isn't worth the squeeze there. So what our plan is just to swap this trigger for a different one. I really like the Harrison design stuff that John Harrison makes, so I'm probably gonna buy another one of those triggers and toss it in here. And I really dig that. These are not the grips that came on the gun. These are ones I threw on here. These are wood caliber black walnut grips. They're really nice. They're really classy looking. They give great texture, which I really dig. On the back of the gun here, this gun would have shipped with a flat mainspring housing because it was a model of 1911 and not a 1911A1. But at some point, someone threw on an arch mainspring housing. Now, I'm a godless heathen. I prefer how an arch mainspring housing feels because, again, big hands, I feel like it gives me a better presentation of a holster. I like that on this gun. And then the last little thing here, well, 2 things here. We have the Colt magazine release, but it was checkered by someone, so it's nice and aggressive. A lot of the early ones were just smooth. And then, of course, the front strap has very, very aggressive checkered. You can see it's not a whole lot of extra meat there on the front of the gun. It's probably like 15 to 20 LPI. It's pretty aggressive. I was speaking to a buddy of mine about this gun last month, and I'll link his channel down below. His name is Squishface, and he does War Thunder videos. He knows a whole lot about these Bullseye guns, and he mentioned that depending on the branch of the military that this gun was used in Bullseye competition for, they actually use different patterns of checkering. So I need to do more research. I can't, quantifiably or qualitatively say that this is a Army gun that was, used in Bullseye or Navy or whatever, but this is a little hint there. All I can say is that between the grips, the arch mainspring housing, the beaver tail, and then the checkering, this gun just locks right into the hand. So I dig it. One thing that I wish it had, I don't have a beveled magwell, but that wasn't really a thing that was appearing on factory guns until really like the 70s and 80s. But for this being a Bullseye gun where reloading on the clock likely wasn't a thing, it's understandable that it's not there. That might be a thing I do in the future, but eh. So yeah, my plans for this gun going forward is just to continue shooting it. With that, I've used the factory magazine here, which is a, we dated it via the date code, I think it's like 1942, 1943 production. I was surprised that the magazine actually worked fine in this gun. I had no malfunctions. I'm primarily using Wilson mags in this gun, but still. But aside from swapping out the trigger to a Harrison design trigger, I think I'm leaving the gun as is. If I can find a deal on a better, shorter sight rib, maybe I'll go for it. But considering I paid $800 for this gun, $80 for the grips, I'm happy just to leave it as is because I think it's a cool time capsule of a style of shooting sport that is kind of gone now. But this is still a fun gun just to shoot with. With all this extra weight on top with the Bowmar sight rib, it really is a soft shooting gun. So yeah, I'll have a couple more videos coming out over the next few days on some of my weird eclectic guns. But this is one that I thought was really cool and I thought it deserved a little bit of some limelight here. So thanks for watching and check out down below for more videos.